Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Good evening. This is Rox Burkey, and thank you so much for joining me this evening. I am so excited to have one of my favorite people on the planet with us this evening, Caleb Pirtle. Caleb, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's great to be any place where you're involved, and a book's involved, and there always seems to be.
It's not bad enough that you're an international bestseller, which I'm very envious of, but you're award-winning, and you have more than 70 books, and you just are doing everything. I'm so delighted. But I want to start someplace where the readers can kind of relate. So I'm going to go back in time.
That's a long way back, Rox.
Why did you decide to start writing, Caleb?
As soon as I was old enough to realize that I was too dumb to dig ditches, I became a writer. That's all I've ever wanted to do. When I was 6 years old, I thought if someday I could work on a newspaper and have a front page byline, life would not get any better. So I majored in journalism, went to work on small town newspapers, then large city newspapers, and just kept writing.
So how did you make that jump? Because from my perspective, it's a jump from newspapers with your own byline to creating novels, and really good novels too.
Well, thanks. It's never a leap. It's always a lot of little steps along the way. When I was at the Star-Telegram in Fort Worth, I did a lot of feature writing on the state of Texas. So when Governor Conley created the Texas Tourist Development Agency, he hired me as his first writer to promote Texas. Then in the late 60s, when Southern Living magazine came along, they hired me as their first travel editor. So Linda and I moved to Birmingham for 10 years, and I wrote travel throughout the South. And while at Southern Living, I wrote my first two books. They were not novels. They were both nonfiction. One was on the unending season about Callaway Gardens, and the other was XIT, the American Cowboy. So at that point, the bug to write books got a hold of me, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Now, I know that you write some different things. You write fiction, you write nonfiction. Do you have a favorite genre that you kind of focus on now?
For so much of my life, I wrote historical books, travel books, and when I worked for a publishing company in Dallas, we wrote a lot of corporate histories. And the reality is all of those nonfiction books that I wrote through the years gave me an opportunity to develop a catalog of fascinating people and fascinating parts of the world. So now when I sit down to write a novel, I just open up that Rolodex in my mind, and there's a character waiting to climb out.
Oh, that's really fun. And I know that Linda's really supportive of you, and that makes it really easy. Is she the first one that reads some of your work?
She's always the first one to read it. At which point she reads, and I go out and bury my head and pray to God she doesn't decide what I do with commas. Because Linda's an English teacher, a high school principal and administrator, and she writes extremely well. She's working on her fourth cozy mystery. So she reads my work, and we sit and discuss it and do the same with her books. And it just kind of works out real well. After a while, she knows what page I'm on before I get there.
That must be a little bit unnerving,
The art of writing is unnerving. Every time you sit down in front of a blank screen, it's unnerving. And I wrote a blog here a while back. It's one of those things that really disturbed me, and I don't know why. But you sit down and you write a scene, or you write a couple of scenes, or maybe even write a chapter, because I write short chapters. And I sit there and wonder, if I hadn't written it today and had waited and written it tomorrow, Would it have been the same? Or would it have been totally different? I don't know. And it just completely boggles my imagination.
So do you have a process that you use when you are writing? Is it like, your timetable, or, the pen has to be a certain area, the sun has to be right, or?
No, not really. Basically, I'm one of these pantsers from day one. I have a character. I pretty well know my characters before I start writing. And then I just write the first sentence and turn the story over to them. And I follow along, and I write down what they do and write down what they say. And for me, that seems to work real well.
Okay. So now I know that you're involved in some series. You have more than one series, as I recall. You have some noir thrillers, and you've got some other series. So series is a little bit different than an individual book. Is that easier for you from a character development perspective to know they're going to be part of a series? Or do you even know that they're part of a series when you start?
I never know that it's a series when I write the first book, because the books I write are standalones. I don't carry a theme from one book to the next. If you read the third book, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference whether you read books 1 or 2 or not. And I think what happens to me is what happens to a lot of writers. We fall in love with our characters, and we follow them along, and we laugh with them, and we cry with them, and we're frightened with them. And all of a sudden comes that dreaded moment when you write that final sentence and place that final period and write the end, and you think, I'm not ready to say goodbye. And then the next thing you know, the character sitting on top of your shoulder, whispering in your ear, I've got another story to tell. And when they do, I'm willing to listen.
That's awesome. So tell me about one of your favorite characters. Just one of them.
Probably my most interesting character that I'm most fascinated with is Ambrose Lincoln. With the historical thriller series that I did, set back in the late 1930s, early 1940s, with World War II as a backdrop. Since I grew up as a child in that era, I've always been thoroughly fascinated. And I was sitting late one night watching television, just roaming the channels as I tend to do. And on the History Channel, I ran across a fascinating documentary about the U.S. government's mind control experiments in the 1930s, where they used soldiers, insane asylum, people, prisoners from prison, anybody they could get to use as volunteers. And they used all sorts of mind-numbing drugs and hallucinatory drugs and electrical shocks to the brain to try to mold and create a behavior that they could control. And I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm just fascinated. I knew of mind control experiments. I didn't realize they had started in the 1930s. And all of a sudden, a voice came on in my head and said, that's me. And I said, who are you? He said, I'm Ambrose Lincoln. They stole my memory, they erased my mind, and they took my past away. And I knew right then I had a character. And he and I have been rather closely attached ever since.
So that kind of a character, not only does it sound like a character a lot of people could relate to, but it sounds like it would be as relevant if those books were read today as when you originally created them.
And I think they probably will. The only difference is when you write about World War II, you actually have a face of evil. If that's a backdrop, I mean, you have all sorts of the problems with the Night of Broken Glass and the stormtroopers and all sorts of faces of evil that people can relate to. And I think that makes a huge difference in being able to tell a story.
Yeah, it does. And a lot of the people that could relate to that particular imagery are not the majority of the people today. The millennials can't relate to to that kind of a picture because they never experienced that kind of a picture.
They did not experience, but they can understand if anybody is forced to undergo all of these electric shocks to the brain. That's frightening today as it was then. In fact, I often tell people, I write science fiction. At least when I wrote about it, it was real. But when you look back, it was science fiction because people didn't realize those sorts of things even took place.
And if they thought about it today, they'd be just as shocked as when you looked at it on the History Channel and kind of got some of your ideas. So it's very scary what people can do.
It is. And it's really scary what people are willing to do and what drives the madman to do it. It's all of those backstories, Rox, that you and I know so well. What they do is not nearly as fascinating as what drove them to do it. Exactly.
Well put. And I know that you end up doing an awful lot of research when you're working on your stories to get the accuracy of the historical facts and the places. That's part of that journalism time that you spent in doing travel and all of that coming to bear, right?
Well, it really is. You learn to research as second nature. You research as easily as you breathe. In fact, probably you the same way, especially in your Enigma series. I have to do as much research, or maybe more research, for fiction than I do for nonfiction, especially when you're doing historical fiction, because those things that we just assume other people don't know about, there's always a reader out there that will point out if you have the wrong vehicle, the wrong weapon, and in fact, in the book Night Side of Dark, where I have the German train picking up the Jewish people out of Poland, I researched it back to the point that I found the train and the number of the train and the times it actually arrived and left. Now, nobody in their right mind, whoever reads that book, will worry about what the number of the train was, but I know it's there, and that's kind of satisfying.
Exactly, and that's a perfect point for us to take a quick pause and hear from our sponsors, and I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about the different formats that you have books in. So stick around, Caleb.
I'll be here.
What would you do if you had to put your life on hold to parent your parents? You have to laugh to keep from crying. How to Parent Your Parents is a must-read book full of antidotes and practical advice to help parenting your parents. Author Charlotte Kenyon provides insights to help prepare anyone facing the challenges of caring for elderly parents. Check out our website at www.howtoparentyourparents.net.
National Authors Day is November 2nd, 2019 in Houston, Texas. Join us at Discovery Green as we celebrate being a published author and remind the world of the great books that writers constantly create for your enjoyment. You can register at authors.dearindy.org.
Hello, I am the author and poet Denise Bryson. I am the author of The Things That Cross My Mind, Love's Reality, both in book and audio form. I am also noted as one of the best poets of 2011. I have two new projects coming up. One is the Blinky series, where Blinky tells us all about our coins and our bills for our children. I also have a book coming out called Say Ye. It's quotes from Denise Bryson, just inspirational and that will help you along the way.
Hi, this is Alan at Ask Alan Anything, a podcast designed to help you learn about publishing and marketing your books. So join us live on Facebook at 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time. The page is Indie Beacon Radio. Ask any questions about publishing and marketing your book. We're here to help you, and we've been doing it for a long time. So I hope to see you then. Thanks.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
And welcome back. This is Rox Burkey, and I'm delighted to continue my discussion with my good friend and famous author, Caleb Pirtle. Thank you so much for joining back. So when we left, Caleb, we were talking about some of the research that you do, and we were talking about a series, but you have also, over time, developed different formats to really attract your readers and your fans. And so you have what kinds of formats available on your books? And don't go through all of them, but.
Well, I've written a lot of 4-color coffee table quality books.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, XIT, the American Cowboy, was a coffee table book that was illustrated by the 10 members of the Texas Cowboy Artists Association. And it sold 50,000 books for $40 a copy. I like to think it was my black and white words, but back in this corner of my mind, I know it was all of their 4-color art pieces that did it. But I learned something from the artist that really has made a difference in the writing. One of the cowboy artists, Ken White, said the only reason I paint a picture is so I can go back and do the highlights. And in writing, that's what I remember. You write the story just so you can go back, polish it, revise it, refine it, rewrite it, and add the highlights. Because so often, the first draft that's on a piece of paper is just a conglomeration of words. If you go back and add the highlights, then all of a sudden it has a lyrical quality and sings a little.
Well, and in your case, it actually paints pictures in people's minds. Their imagination takes over with the way you join words together, and your artistry is a little bit different, but no less powerful than the Texas artists that you included. So that's amazing. It's a good way to look at it, too. So I know that you have books that are available that are paperback. They're also available on ebooks. And you've been kind of, going into the audiobook perspective. How would you find a narrator for your books?
Well, I had a couple of books that are audio books, and that was a huge conundrum.
Yeah.
It takes so much time to promote an ebook and a paperback. How do you find that extra time to also promote the audio book? Audio books are absolutely wonderful. You've got some great audio books, and that's probably the wave of the future. But for the moment, I've kind of backed off from audiobooks just because I don't have time to properly promote all 3 types of books. That's probably short-sighted on my part, but that's what I'm doing at the moment.
No, and that makes sense. You've got to go with where you're comfortable. And every author I've ever met moves at their own pace. I mean, that's just the way it is. There's life. Yes, you have a passion for writing and you've had it for a long time, but you have a life in there too.
That's what my wife says. Occasionally she walks in and says, life just passed you by. You might want to try to catch up. And sometimes we do.
And she is a wonderful woman. I've always enjoyed talking to her. And I'm glad to hear that she's writing some more. So you also go to a lot of events, or you have in the past, because that's where I met you originally. So do you go to as many events now as you have?
We try to go to as many writing conferences as possible. We're members of 2 or 3 different writing organizations and try to make as many of those meetings as we can, although they're scattered all over Central and East Texas, and you can't make them all. But it's a great way to get to know other authors. It's a great way to hear presentations and get to learn what other authors are doing, what their goals are, how they're trying to write and accomplish certain things. And I've often said, if I go to a writer's conference and learn one thing, one nugget that I didn't know previously, it was worth the time, the effort, and the money, because that nugget may unlock the door to another story, and more importantly, to another way to tell it.
Now, there you go. I mean, you can, no matter how experienced you are, you can always learn something if you keep your eyes open to that possibility. So where's a couple of upcoming events where I might see you or where others might see you?
Well, I know that we're going to be together in San Antonio for the wonderful gala and marketing event that Alan and Texas Authors and yours play such a major role in. And then that's probably the premier event for Texas authors anywhere in this part of the country. And then we'll also be going to the Northeast Texas Writers Association up in Mount Pleasant. We'll be at the East Texas Writers Guild conference coming up in later July in Tyler. So, you know, and in fact, this afternoon, Linda came in and she had a list. She said, okay, let's sit down and decide what we're going to do for the rest of the summer. And I'm thinking, thank God I'm schizophrenic, because one of me couldn't do all of this.
So do you have a website where people can kind of track your progress on where you're going to be, especially if you're going to be available to sign books?
Well, we have a big time website called CalebandLindaPirtle.com. And although we feature our books on it and all of our new releases, the heart and soul of the website are other authors across the United States, especially across Texas, across Europe. When people come out with a new book, they need it promoted. We use our website to either put them on the Book of the Moment Club selection. We'll do a daily review of their book. We find all sorts of different ways to promote them and their books, and that's the heart and soul of this game that we play. We're all working together to help each other sell one more book and write one more story, because that's what we do.
Exactly, and you are extremely kind to other authors. I've been on the receiving end of your kindness more than once, and so I know that you're a real value for promoting authors, working with authors, and helping to promote readers. So that's a really positive thing. And that website again was CalebandLindaPirtle.com.
You've got it.
Okay, so
it's subtitled "Here Comes a Mystery," because we believe that every mystery has a romance, every romance has a mystery, and every book is a Western. And somewhere in there is a love story, a mystery, and a shootout.
I want to make sure people can find that website, so I'm going to spell it out. CalebandLindaPirtle.com. And I know that you respond when people actually send you a note. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to make sure and reach out even if you just want to chat. I know you've responded to other things to me, so it's awesome.
Yeah, I would love to hear from them. I'd love to know about their books. We don't charge for our service, as it's something that we feel obligated that we'd like to do to help other authors. The website gets about 30,000 visitors a month, so at least we can provide some exposure. And you never know when the next blogger, the next reader is the one who can make a difference.
Yep, I think it's awesome. So we're going to take a break and listen to some more of our sponsors. And then I want to make sure people know that you're going to be at the Authors Marketing event at the end of July in San Antonio, Texas. And they can see that on your website too, because that's the thing I get to see you at. So stick around. We'll come right back.
authors, do you know the true cost of being published? In the Author's Revolution Workbook, BL & Bourgeois gives you hands-on tools to use and to understand the true cost of being published. He will also give you information about low-cost or free programs that are designed to help you market your book. BL & Bourgeois has been helping hundreds of authors since 2011, educating them on how to better market and sell their books. Buy the Author's Revolution Workbook exclusively at indielector.store.
Burkey here, award-winning authors for the Techno Thrillers books, the Enigma book series. Technology, today's weapon of choice, the cyber good guys versus the cyber bad guys.
We invite you to join our website, theenigmaseries.com, where you will get sample chapters, sample audibles, book trailers, and you can sign up for our mailing list. The books are available in ebook, paperback, and Audible. Thank you.
Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
So welcome back. I'm Rox Burkey, and again, I have Kayla Pirtle with me, and we've covered so many things, and I want to kind of, in this segment, I want to cover a little bit of advice that you can give to up-and-coming authors and steps they could take, things they might try, so they don't give up hope. You know, when you're struggling, you got to have hope.
You know, and the oldest cliche in the world is every overnight sensation takes 20 years to make. And then the reality is you need to write if you have a story to tell. And if there's a story inside your heart that's beating against your chest, demanding to get out, you need to write it. The first one may not be as good as the second, because I believe every book you write should be better than the last book. And if it's not, you need to rewrite it. And the thing is, what so many young writers that I've talked with, they want to write a book, but they look at this daunting task of writing 300 to 400 pages. And what I tell them is real simple. You write 3 pages a day. It takes what, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, even an hour, just to write 3 pages a day. Take Saturday and Sunday off, just 3 pages a day. Everybody has time for that. And if you do, at the end of 6 months, you'll have a 350-page novel. So it's not really daunting. It's the old eat the elephant, one bite at a time. James Lee Burke, who's one of my favorite writers, says, every day I have 2 scenes in mind. And I sit down and write those 2 scenes. They may be short scenes, they may be long scenes. But by the time I finish, I know the 2 scenes I need to write tomorrow. And that's what I tell writers. There's no reason to ever have a writer's block, because you're not writing a book. You're just writing one scene at a time and then piecing it together like a quilt. And if you think of it one scene at a time, it doesn't seem so frightening.
Well, no kidding. And today, with having a computer and having electronics, it's not like when you were typing on a typewriter. You can actually move and shift things around much easier than you could the first time I wrote something.
You know, the first 3 books I wrote by longhand, and did all the little edits and revisions and additions and new paragraphs all up in the corner and down around the edges. To me, the only reason I'd ever want to give up is you type half a page and suddenly realize you left out a word, or there's a paragraph you should have put in. And the only way you had to do it was rip that page out and start over. So I wrote longhand. So you're exactly right. With the computer, nobody should ever shy away from writing.
So are you working on a book right now?
I am always working on a book right now.
I know.
I have just finished a new concept for me. I'm convinced that from everything I've read and from all the people with whom I've talked, that the attention span of readers is shorter and shorter. They don't want to read epics. As a result, they want to sit down and finish a book in 1 or 2 sittings.
Okay.
So a novella has suddenly become really popular. So I had a series.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website at indiebeacon.com.